Hello, good morning. Hope you've enjoyed the conference so far. I'm glad that you've taken your time out to join me here this last day. My name is Mads Christensen, and I'm a program manager for the ASP.NET team. And more specifically on the bundling and minification stuff that you might have seen from Scott Guthrie's keynote. So today we're going to talk a little bit about performance and the different aspects of performance and how you can actually, fairly simple, increase your website performance substantially. So website performance is one of these abstract things. There's so many different ways we can go about this. And you might think, why is this even important? We have internet connection speeds are getting faster and faster and faster all the time, so why does it really matter? Well, Google did a test. If they slowed down their search page by 500 milliseconds, that's half a second, they would drop 20% in traffic. That's a lot. And 500 milliseconds, what is 500 milliseconds? You can probably notice it. You would think half a second, yeah, I can notice that, but it's not that important. Well, apparently it is, right? According to Google's test here. Amazon, they tried to see what would happen if they slowed down their web page by 100 milliseconds. 100 milliseconds, we can't even recognize 100 milliseconds. Our brain doesn't work, but it does. And 1% drop in revenue for Amazon, I did some calculations, is almost $1 million a day by just slowing down their website by 100 milliseconds. So it is very, very important that we do what we can to get a fast and responsive website. So there's many ways we can go about improving the performance. And if you have a website, almost any sort of website looks a little bit like this. You have some database or other storage mechanism. You might have some data logic layer, business logic layer, and then at the top, your presentation layer, right? ASP NET, IIS, HTML, JavaScript, and so on. And if you want to focus on the database, we can do some better indexing, and there's a lot of stuff to be done down there, and data logic, and maybe do some caching strategies on the business logic layer, and so on. But what we're going to talk about today is the top box. It's only the top box, the ASP.NET and the IIS web server. And we didn't really know when we did this planning for this session that the bundling and minification stuff that you saw in the Scott Gu demo was going to get so much attention from you guys. We kind of didn't anticipate that. So I have actually done the demos a little bit differently than originally planned, so we get a little bit more deep down into the bundling and minification and hopefully completely demystify this magic that a lot of people thought it was. So hopefully you will have all your answers at the end of this session. So why do we focus on only the top box? Well, if we look at a website, this is what any given website might look like. This is the request tree. Basically what I did was I loaded a web page, and I had the web developer tools and IE record the requests coming in. And this is what it looks like. The top box up there is the page itself. So if you do any data binding and all these things on a user control or some partials or master page or wherever, chances are that it lives in that top box, only one of them, the top one. And as you can see here, this is over time, so the further out you go to the right, that's in seconds, that's time. You can see that the HTML itself is responsible for just a little fraction of that time. So the more requests we have, the longer this tree will get, and the slower your site will be. Imagine that you're on a mobile phone, and you're outside Wi-Fi range, and you're maybe not even on 3G because you're somewhere in the mountains. The more requests you now have to download is substantially going to slow down your website. So this is all the CSS files, the images, the JavaScript files that makes up the website. And the browser has to request all of them, one by one. Well, modern browsers can do 6 at a time. But it's all a little bit jagged, and it will all end somewhere maybe a few seconds out from the initial load of the page before anything is rendered. And if you're as impatient as me, you end up in situations where you don't want to wait for it to load, and you hit back in the browser and you find something else to do. There we go. So I borrowed this chart from Steve Saunders, who wrote a brilliant book a few years back about performance. And it shows average website, well, in this case not average, it's the biggest websites there is, how the browser spent their time loading their page. And we can see that only a little fraction of it goes to the actual HTML, to the page itself. And by far the majority of all the requests coming in goes somewhere else. JavaScript, CSS, downloading image files, and so on. So what can we do about that? Well, let's take a look. I built a website. And it's a simple website. This is for an example, it doesn't do that much. But you might be wondering, what can be the problem here? This looks like a regular website. There's nothing inherently wrong about it. But if we take a look at how it's actually built, here we look at so this runs from localhost, so you can see here the different images and styles you downloaded. They all come out here, and they all take some time. And you see at the very top, we have the HTML page itself. It doesn't take that much time. It's really, really quick. It's all the rest of the stuff that takes a long time. So if we look in Visual Studio here, we can see that we have a pretty usual web page. It's got a default ASPX. It's got some style sheets. It's got some JavaScript files. And those are all embedded on the default ASPX. So this is an example. I only have the one default ASPX, so it's easy to kind of see what's going on. If we take a look in Firefox, we have some tools that we can use here. How many people here know about the tools YSlow and or page speed? Raise your hand. A fair amount of you. Good. So YSlow and page speed are static analysis tools that will look on your website and tell you where you can improve the performance. So it's really, really useful for getting a quick overview on some of the tweaks and things you can do to get really, really great performance. Again, it just concentrates on the relationship between the client and the server. So a request and response is going back and forth between browser and server. So this here is page speed. It gives us, take a look here. It gives us a score of 38 out of 100. That's not very good. We want to reach 100. That's very, very difficult, but that's the goal. How do we get 100 points? YSlow, you see here it has some rules that it looks at, and some of it is red, some of it is green. YSlow is by Yahoo, and they measure some other things, but they're very similar. Though YSlow gives us actually 76 out of 100, right here. So they measure some different things, and that's why we get some different scores. But in both of them, we want to reach 100. And if we look how the page actually is structured, we see here we have 46 requests. We got some HTML, of course, 5 JavaScript files, 6 style sheets, 25 CSS background images, 8 regular images, in HTML, image tags, and then one fav icon. So the first time we hit this page, it's 46 requests coming from a mobile phone on a 2G network. And it's going to download almost 1,200 kilobytes of script files and images and so on. This is not an uncommon scenario. This is very normal. But we can do a lot to help it along the way. You see over here, the rightmost chart is when we already have visited the site before, and stuff is in the browser's cache. We still see that we have 46 requests. That's not entirely true in all browsers. They will actually cache some of the images and so on. But the browser will cache them based on their own logic, because we haven't told them how to cache them. So we don't control this step. So let's take a look at some of the rules here. So the first one that Wiselow tells us is a troublemaker here. We get the lowest grade that we can get, an F, and that is that we make too many HTTP requests. Right? We make too many requests to images, to style sheets, and to JavaScript. And this is where the bundling and minification can really, really help us out. How many people here in this room does some sort of bundling and minification today? That's a lot of you. Okay, that's really good. Traditionally, to do that, you either have to write your own, or you have to use some of the brilliant, actually, open source projects out there that does the same. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about it, or they don't use it, because maybe it's a little bit of a difficult concept to get your head wrapped around. And hopefully I will demystify that to a lot of you, how this works. Because what we have been doing is actually build in a mechanism to do this in ASP.NET. So, to bring down our HTTP requests, I can go into my global ASACs, and remove this, by the way, and write one line of code. It looks like this. This now enables minification and bundling of CSS and JavaScript only those two. These are the default things that we're going to bundle and minify. Minify means remove white space, comments, everything that isn't needed for the browser to understand what you want to do in CSS or JavaScript. So for JavaScript, for instance, we're actually rewriting the names of your variables to A, B, C, and so on, one character variable names. So we can really compress it. And by doing this, we're actually hooking into the routing mechanism that was born in MVC, but was then ported into ASP.NET 4.0. And that makes it possible for us to only have one line of code in the global ASACs in the application start, and nothing in the web config. So there's nothing that's configurable here except for this one line. So how does it work? Well, we have some scripts and we have some style sheets in some folders. It doesn't really matter what the folders are called. They could be named whatever you want. But this one line in global ASACs allows me to reference a folder instead of the individual files. So I can now reference, in this case, the scripts folder, and it will automatically take all the JavaScript files in that folder, bundle them into one file, strip all the white space, minify them a lot, and serve them as one united response. This all happens at runtime. We don't create a file on disk. It's at runtime. It happens once, so there's no overhead, there's no file I/O that we need to do the bundling every time. It happens once. And let's see how it works. So instead of doing all my references like I do here to the individual files, I can do this. Whoop. There we go. Styles CSS. So this is the convention. whack folder name, whack CSS, bundles all CSS files in that folder. We can do the same with JavaScript. And, oh. Here we go. So that's the convention we have. Whack CSS and whack JS, respectively. So what about the, let's see this work, actually. Because now what we've been doing is that we've been removing a lot of style sheets and JavaScript files. So what does our tools here say to that? Let me just refresh the page. And we run the test again. And instead of 76, we now get 84, a score of 84. So we're getting closer. And if we do page speed, we're up to 82. So they start to align a little bit, those two tools. But if we stay back in YSlow, we can see that it's now substantially different. Let me zoom in a little bit here on this, actually, because this is really interesting. So before, we had 46 requests. Now we're down to 37. That's a big difference by that little change that I did. But because we do minification in the process, that means after we bundle all the files into a single response, we remove all the white space, all the comments, rewrite your variable names, and so on. We're actually almost down to, well, below 700 kilobytes. We were almost at 1,200 in the beginning. And if we look at the prime cache, well, we can see here that we're also down on the requests. It's going to look better. This is the second time that people are going to visit your website. So this looks better, but we're still not at 100%, right? So let's do some other stuff. So one of the things that we can just do using these tools is we can just take them one by one. It's really, really easy. We can see that we still have too many images. It still wants us to make fewer requests. But let's take the next one first. Compress components with gzip. How many people here do that actively today? Show of hands. About half of you. That's really, really good. All text files, you know, when you zip up a file on your desktop using zip or WinRAR and all these tools, text files can really be compressed a lot. And we can enable that on the server as well. We can tell the server everything that we respond to a client that is text-based, zip it up. The browsers all understand this. And let me go to the web config. We get down here, and you can see here, URL compression. I already have it here in my system web server, and do dynamic compression false, static compression false, all this is set to false. And this is because IIS 7.5 enables this by default. If you're running Windows Server 2008, you actually have to do what I'm doing right now. You have to manually set these parameters to true. So let me just do that. There's three attributes, and I'm going to set all of them to true. This is all very well documented. And if I do this, and go back, rerun my page, run the test, we now get 87. Google PageSpeed, 88. So we're actually getting really, really close. And of course, we can do more. So this is the part that we didn't really know. So I've actually been writing some demos for you guys to explain more in detail the bundling and minification. So we're going to look at how it actually works and how we can extend it and how we can customize it to do exactly what we want it to do. So if we head back into Visual Studio. First of all, Let me explain a little bit about the magic that I've got a lot of questions on during this week on how do we actually handle the sorting. How do we know that when we bundle stuff up, how do we know what order things should be at, right? That's one of the magic things that we're doing. And basically, we are aware that jQuery goes before your custom scripts. We're also aware that Prototype, Mojo, Dojo, MooTools, and all these other libraries go before your own code. We're also aware that if you have jQuery plugins that are called jQuery.mycustomthing.js goes before your custom code. And for CSS, we know that reset CSS and normalize CSS goes before your own style sheets. So we do that. We actually look at the file names, and we make sure that we maintain an order based on those rules, very simple rules. The rest of the files are alphabetically sorted, just as they are in the Solution Explorer and Visual Studio. So they keep their alphabetic sorting. But if you have your own libraries that we don't know about or don't support, you can completely customize what your sorting rules are going to be. You can also say, what if I don't want what if I don't want the convention-based folder approach to how my bundles are being constructed? What if I want that folder there, and I want that folder over here, and that single file in that folder in that third place, and I want them to be bundled together? Then this doesn't work, because this is the convention based on folders. But you can do exactly what you want using this API. Again, this is like registering routes in global ASACs, where you can register what URL goes where. We've taken the exact same approach, so it looks very similar. So let's say I do something custom here. I should zoom a little bit. Let me do this, actually. Yuck. I hope you can all see what's going on here. So what we're doing now is that we're registering our own bundle. We're creating a bundle that's located at the relative path whack myCSS. Remember, we're using routing. So we're actually just registering that route, now going into the bundle mechanism. And we're going to add a file in the _demo folder, and we're going to add a directory. And we are going to add the entire directory called styles, and we tell it, give me all CSS files in that folder. Where it says false as a parameter to the add directory method, this is whether or not we want to look in subdirectories or not. So we have complete control over what files go where. And the order of this, my add file is before my add directory. So that file also is bundled before the files in my directory. Does it make sense? OK. That's good. So let me just save this. Oh, and by the way, I forgot. Type of CSS minify. We have an interface called iBundleTransform. I'm going to show you in a little bit how that works. But basically, it lets you take advantage of our bundling and do your own processing. In this case, I'm using what we have already built in called CSS minify. There is one called JS minify if you want to do this with JavaScript. And that's all it takes to do, what did we call it? myCSS. Oh. There we go. And it'll do this. One line minified JavaScript. Sorry, CSS. I'm completely in control of what the path is going to be like. I can now just reference in my CSS tag on my page to look for whack myCSS. And this is what they'll get. Okay. So what if I want to register something else than CSS and JavaScript? I might have some custom stuff that I want to bundle and do something with. Gonna zoom back out here. What if I want to take over our built-in CSS minifier and roll my own or do whatever I want, but so I want to take over the WAC CSS path suffix that you say your folder is called styles, WAC CSS. I want to take over that paradigm and say everything WAC CSS now goes through my custom processing class. And that's exactly what I've been doing here. So I register here. This is the name of the suffix, the WAC CSS, or WAC your own thing. It works on all bundles. This is a dynamic folder bundle. This is different from what we just saw, where it was a static bundle where I said, give me that file, and give me that file, and give me that directory on this URL. This is dynamic. It says any folder that I append, in this case, CSS2, run it through my custom class. And I've written a custom class here. So CSS image embed transform. I just inherit from CSS minify, which has one method that I need to override, and that's the process method. So what I'm actually doing is pretty cool. I'm going to take all the files, all the file references, image references in my style sheet, and embed them directly into my style sheet. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? So what I can do, if I open my style sheet here, jump down, here's one. I have an image reference. So we saw before from Wieslow that we still have too many references to image files. But you also saw the design layout. A lot of it is static images that are used to build up the overall layout of the site. They're not contextual images for the separate pages about unique things. They're the global things that I do to build up the master layout of my site. And what I can do, again, this is cross-browser. IE8 and above, and all the other browsers as well, support data URIs. Data URIs is a standard, and it allows us to do the thing I have right here. This is that same image encoded as a base 64 image. I can now take that image and delete it from my project because it no longer exists other than as embedded here. So we want to do this because we're going to download the image anyway, right? So when the user comes and wants to download or want to see our page, he's going to download all these images anyway. So we can just as well put them in the style sheet because he's also going to download the style sheet anyway, right? He has to get these images because they exist everywhere on my page. So let's move them into a base 64 string and embed them here. I'm going to tell you how you can do that in a little bit. So this is our goal. And the rule that I have set up, actually, let me just remove this. So because we minify, and this is a code comment, this will actually be stripped out. So I'm just going to leave it there. But the rule that I've set is that I want to be in control. I want to say, don't just take all the PNG and images that I have in my style sheet as referenced. Only take the ones that has a URL parameter called embed in it. I'm going to save this, go back, and if you look at my, here you go, this is my regular expression that I'm going to look at all this, this big string of bundled up style sheet. And this is what I'm going to replace it with, all the data URI stuff that you see just underneath it. But basically, I'm just overriding the CSS minify, so I'm going to get that still. And I'm going to get that just by calling the base process. By calling base process, I'm calling my base class process method, which in this case minifies the CSS. So if I go back to, here we go. Reload this guy. A little bit better in page speed, but YSlow was actually the one having the biggest problems with this. Oh. I closed it. Here we go. Unfortunately, YSlow is a little bit unstable. It kind of needs some massaging to actually show up sometimes. Still not there. Got it right there. Close down, open Firefox. Sorry about this. I think we get it now. There we go. All right. So I forgot to save my global ASICs. Here we go. Do an update. This was IE. Here is Firefox. And we're now getting 90. And you see the F up here, the big red one, is now gone. Because what we now did was take all the images, and as you now see here, do a hard refresh on this guy. Oh, start capturing. Here we go. There we go. So now our request tree is much, much smaller. So what we just did had a really big impact on how the browser is going to request the different asset that makes up your page. It's going to make a lot fewer requests. And the responses are all smaller because they've been minified. So let's take a look at it now. I will just zoom a little bit here. So we're now ending up with having 19 requests. We had 46 to begin with. We're now down to 19. And instead of 1,200 kilobyte, we're down to 450. Thank you. All right, and if you already have been at the page, it also looks really good. Everything seems to be cached. We do have some additional requests that we don't control yet. So let's actually control those extra requests, because we still got all the regular images that we can do something about. And you see here, page speed says, leverage browser caching. So that's something that we haven't really done yet. So if I go back to my web config, and only the web config is needed for this. I can add this little piece of code here, and it actually tells me that all the static content on my site, that static content means files served by the static file handler. So it doesn't mean the bundling stuff we have right here, because that's not static. That's go through the ASP.NET. But all the stuff that's like images, text file, XML files that you just serve as is, we're now going to say use the max age HTTP header to tell the browser to cache my images for 365 days. So if we head back, do a hard refresh, we can see that we're actually getting really close now. We get a score of 96. Score of 96. But take a look at this over here. when the browser now hits your site for the second time, it only has to make 2 requests. Everything else is cached in memory. So imagine the scenario where you're on a cell phone on a slow network. This is making a huge difference, right? Okay. So what other stuff can we do? What about JavaScript? What about CoffeeScript? Has anyone here heard of CoffeeScript or using CoffeeScript today? A few hands. All right. So because we have this pipeline open to actually deal with the content of style sheets and actually basically whatever you want to register as a bundle, you can also do all your own pre-processing, and it can be whatever you want. So if you want to play around with some of the new technologies such as SAS or LESS or CoffeeScript to transform your, the response, you can do that. So let me show you how simple that is in this scenario. So what I have here is a folder called hot. I downloaded online on some open source project on GitHub, I think, a CoffeeScript project that's going to handle all my CoffeeScript. And I'm going to just take that and put it in my bin folder. And then I have 2 CoffeeScript files. This is CoffeeScript. Notice that the file extension is .coffee. It's not .js, it's .coffee. It doesn't really matter, because everything that's text-based, whatever the file extension is, we can handle it through the bundling mechanism. But if I take this file, and I say, let's go in here, let's do coffee. Here we go. And this is what I'm going to do to register it. I'm going to create a dynamic folder bundle so that I can find all .coffee files in any folder and have them automatically bundled. I'm going to use the path suffix coffee. Like before we had whack.js or whack.css. I want this to work when I say whack coffee. And I want to roll my own type here, CoffeeScript transform. I've hidden it in here. That's all you need. I'm doing the same thing. I'm inheriting from JS minify, subclassing it. I'm taking the bundle.content. This is just a string. This is after the bundling have happened using the sorting rules that we have defined if you use our default or your own custom ordering. We read the content, and that is a string. This is a string-based thing. Right? And we expose it here, and you can set it as well. So this is exactly what I do. I call down to those open source projects in my bin folder, and I call compile on them and pass them in my bundle output. Then I call the base.process down here, which runs the JS minification, so I remove all the white space. Okay? So let's see how that works. So here's the convention. This is a dynamic folder, so I have 2 coffee scripts in a folder called hot. Okay? I can therefore access them doing hot. That's the folder name. Coffee. Here we go. So here it is minified, and this is what it looks like. So now on 2 lines in the class that I used to subclass the JS minify, I was able to do this. I didn't register any handlers in the web config. In fact, I didn't touch the web config for this to work at all. Drop in the DLL and just register it, and that's about it. A little bit deeper, we can actually go in and say, If I don't want to use minification, because whatever reason, or I'm using a format like an XML format where maybe it doesn't make sense, then I don't have to inherit or subclass from one of our JS or CSS minifiers. I can just do this. I bundle transform, remove the override method, remove this, go back, refresh, and here we go. And if I open it up in source view, you can see we don't minify at all. It's that simple. So, coming back to our optimization stuff here. Let's see here. So, Google PageSpeed actually tells us 96 is pretty good. We're all green. But it also tells us that 96 is not 100. So, if you're like me, you probably like doing performance optimizations. It's kind of fun as a developer to do those kind of things. So let's get 100, right? Let's not waste our time and get 100. Okay. Let's see here. Scripts.js. Yeah, that's all good. Optimize images. Did you see that? It says optimize images. Okay. So how do you optimize images? This is kind of interesting. We actually went out and looked on a lot of the big websites out there, like the top 500 websites. And then we looked at their images. And it turns out that most of these websites do not have optimized images. This seems like really weird to us, because if you go into some of these photo editing apps, right, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them you can save for web, or you can save optimized, PNG 8 instead of 32 and so on. And you would think, hey, now this is optimized. Well, that's actually not true at all. There's a lot of metadata. There's a lot of stuff that can be done to rearrange the bytes without ruining the quality of the image. And there are some services out there. And I actually wrote a plugin for some of these services. So here I have some images. Let me open up my output window here. There's a Visual Studio plugin that you can go download for free called Image Optimizer. I just right-click on the folder, and I can now say Optimize Images. And look what happens. If you can see the percentages that it's actually optimizing here. These are not small numbers. The files might be small. It might be that you only save a kilobyte here or a kilobyte there on the small files. But what if you have a larger file? It could be like 10 kilobytes or 20 kilobytes. And that's a lot, again, on your phone, for instance. That's a lot. It takes forever to download, right? So what we've done now is that we actually connected to some of the web services out there where some Smush It PNG is one by Yahoo. There's also one called Puny PNG. And this tool actually just talks to them. They have like the craziest algorithms for optimizing your files without sacrificing quality. And then overwrites the files in that folder. So that's what I just did. That's what happened. So let me just go back, clear the cache, and refresh this guy. We still get a 96, but we no longer have a flag, next to the optimized images. So that's gone. And why slow actually already gives us 100. So that's one down. Yay, we got one down, right? We need the next one. And let's take a look at this. One request. We're down to one request when you come in from a prime cache. That's also pretty good. From 46 to 1. Yep. All right. It does some other things. One of them is minify HTML. So we haven't really talked about that at all because we do minify CSS and we do minify JavaScript. Minifying CSS is really, really simple. When you think about it, CSS is a really simple language. There's not a lot of different structures or anything like that, so we can really, really optimize CSS. JavaScript is a little bit more complex because it is a more complex language. But we do some very cool algorithms to actually figure that out. But HTML is a way different story. It is difficult to do that, and it might break your code if you do that, because HTML behaves just differently. So if you have a text box, if you write in a text box, everything within text box, input type, text areas, everything in that actually respects your line breaks. Whereas regular HTML, you need the BR tag to do line breaks, for instance. Same is true, text area, same is true for the pre tag, and there are different rules based on the different types of tags. And there's also the whole notion of significant white space versus insignificant white space, inline elements versus block elements, and so on. So it is more difficult. So we don't include that in the bundling and minification. That doesn't mean, though, you can't roll your own. So let's do that. So I've cheated a little bit and prepared a little code snippet. So what am I doing here? I'm going into my default ASPX code behind. If you're using something that's not web forms, you have other mechanisms of doing this on your layout pages and so on. Because all this is all this is ASP.NET, whether or not it's MVC or it's web forms or web pages, you can all hook into the pipeline, write a module, or as I do, just override the render method of my page. If I had a master page, I would have done it there. But this is what I do. I have just two very, very simple regular expressions. And every time I render a page, I run those regular expressions. And basically what it does is that it removes white space. So let me save this. Go back. Now it looks kind of weird. Right? So now it's, again, the regular expressions I use is just some very simple ones. They don't do one line, because again, if you had text areas, that would kind of completely mess things up. But we have significant less white space here. I didn't remove the comments either. But this is some of the things you can do, especially the older browsers. So if you're still stuck on some of the older browsers for whatever reason, they actually have a little bit more trouble dealing with white space in the HTML. So if you remove that, you will see some performance gains there as well. This web page here I'm building. No, actually, let me finish with that instead. Yeah, we got some time. So you might be wondering, all these references to these bundles, what if I change one of the files? And the browser already cached this bundle response. I make one change to one of the files in the bundle. How will the browser know not to use the one from its cache? This is actually a real serious problem. So what we can do is that we can do this. So instead of, let me actually just have it here on the side. Instead of doing this, we can do this. It's the exact same thing, but if we call into a helper method, a static helper method in the bundle table, which is some of the new stuff here, we can ask it to resolve the bundle URL. So the URL that I'm giving it as a parameter is the same URL as you would expect from before. But what this does under the covers is that it actually renders out a hash code that's sort of the version number of your files. So if any one file changes, that also changes. And here's how it works. Actually, let's do that for the script as well. Here we go, right? Oh. So it's the same, new keyboard here, okay. So it's exactly the same thing we do for CSS or JavaScript or any other bundle, whatever that is. Okay. So let me just reload the page here. What did I do? let's just do the JS. If we take a look at the source code, well, you can see here, let me just zoom in on it. Where did it go? One more. Up here, you now see you have a weird version, v equals, and then some number. Every time I change one of the files in this bundle, that number changes as well. It's not based on the last time of, the last write time. It's actually based on the content of the files. And this is important because in scenarios where you're in one time zone and you deploy to another time zone and so on, there can be some areas where this might break if we only use the last write time. So we actually look in the files and we generate it based on that. Again, this is cached, so we're not going to go through all your bundles and figure this out at every request to the page, right? So it just uses the regular caching mechanisms with the cache dependencies on the files and so on. This is just ASP.NET. There is no magic here. It's all very similar concepts probably to a lot of you. All right, and then one last thing. This website that I've been building here, let's actually see it. It's very pretty. Not really. Anyway, I don't update it that much. Actually, what I do is that every first day of a month, I update some of the text. So that means it's very static the rest of the time. This is very common in a lot of scenarios. You don't update your stuff all the time, all the day, every day or something like that. And you have schedules for when you do update your content. So there's actually no reason why the browser can't cache my page until I know where I'm going to update the content. And as I told you, in this case, it's the first of every month. So I can override the onload method, and I can create a new date that is exactly the first of next month. So it doesn't matter what date it is now. I can set the expiration to the exact day that is the 1st of October in this case. And if I visit this page now, it will tell me, hey, browser, cache this until October 1st. Right, for X amount of days. If I come in tomorrow, it says the same thing, but it's a little bit fewer days. And this is handled just by these couple of lines. I'm going to refresh. And this is what it's looked like. So imagine your mobile phone app. It's going to be really fast now, isn't it? The browser is not going to download one single file of your entire website consistent of 46 files and 1,200 kilobytes of data. Not one byte is transferred over the wire. Thank you. So with that, we have 6 minutes left for questions if you got any. So please fire away. We have one over here. Yes, the question is, what if we already have minified files, like if you do jQuery.min.js, for instance. So in the preview that we're going to get you today, on NuGet, first of all, you don't need the new stuff. It runs on .NET 4.0. You can use it today in your existing apps. That's one thing. The other thing is, it is a preview, and it is a little bit early. So we are actually going to do that if you have a file called jQuery.js, and you have one underneath called jQuery.min.js, we're not going to take the unminified file. We're only going to use the minified, the one that you already have minified. And we're going to do that automatically. It's not in the version that you get here, but that's what we're going to do in the near future. Yep. One more? So the question is there any support for CDN using this technique? No. So if you want to use jQuery or any other tools that you know is on Google or the Microsoft Ajax CDN, you should use those just you would send a reference. And there's a very, very clear reason why you still want to use your regular CDNs for hosting these files, and that is that users most likely already have them cached, so you still don't have to send them over the wire. So keep doing that. We have one over here.
Yeah, you showed how to bundle up the whole directory.
Yep.
Is there a way through markup you can specify any number of files from different directories that get bundled?
So the question is, can we, through the markup, decide what files goes into what bundle? Yes. We don't have any helpers or control for it, but the stuff that I registered in global ASICs on the application start, you can do wherever you want. It doesn't have to, per se, it doesn't have to live there. It just have to run before it works. So that code just have to run once before it works. So you can do your own check if it exists, or you can write an extension or something like that, and it will completely work from your code or user control or partial or whatever. Yep. We have one over here. Excuse me, can you repeat that? Oh, yes. How do you actually, yeah, so how do you do the base 64 encoding of an image, right? Oh. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the image optimizer extension is a free download. It's on the Visual Studio Gallery. If you go to Tools, Extension Manager, here it is, Image Optimizer. It's a free download. Yeah, okay, why I only did a few of them? Why I have to have the embed thing? No, so I actually only showed you that I added the embed tag to one of them. If I go back to the style here. Here I only showed I added this one, but if you look here, I've actually done it on all the PNG files in here as well. So I was cheating and preparing a little bit in advance. But what you want to do is that you want to take all the files that make sense to you to base 64 encode, and that is the files that always is going to live on your website that people have to download no matter what. So, your menu and your footer and all those global things, all those things, just get them in there. Yep. I think that's it. Oh, sorry, we have one more here.
When using the XML syntax to write, let's say, XHTML, minifying of the HTML would be easier?
Yeah, so if we write XHTML instead of HTML, so a more strict XML language, is it easier to minify? Yes. Is it still being a problem? Yes, because you still have the issues with the text area, you still have the issues with blog elements and inline elements and all these things. So it is still difficult. There are people out there who does it and does it fairly well, and you can use their code or their thing directly in your code. Yep. How long is the default lifetime for the hash codes, the expiration, cache expiration? It's application lifetime, right? So it's just a regular cache mechanism that's in the in ASP .NET system web caching. Yep. And we have a final one here. Yes. Question is, if I add a directory if I do my own static bundle and I say, okay, add directory, do we sort using jQuery first and then your own stuff? Yes, you can call the default. I did one here that I say enable default stuff. Enable default bundles, right? You can do this. What's it called? Here. Add default file extension replacements, just nice short name, easy to remember. And add default file orderings. So if you don't use the code above, enable default bundles automatically add these things. If you don't want to enable default bundles, you can still call our stuff and we will just add it. again, you can add your own. Right? So you can always just as a bundle add this ordering, and you have your own logic. It's C#. You can write a class that does very dynamic structures on this as well. Completely open for modification. Okay, final one. 10 seconds. Oh. Yeah, so if you for some reason want to have like very specific that jQuery has to go in a certain place, you can definitely do that. There's nothing here, there's nothing in this that we've done that you can't either extend or replace with your own stuff. And a lot of it is just a matter of, hey, give it a string array with your ordering. You know, it just looks at the file name. It's very simple. So I'm all out of time. Thank you very much for showing up, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.